I want to talk to you today about dethatching before you put grass seed down. I actually get this question a ton from the months of February, March, and April. I also get it periodically in the months of August and September. Now, to jump right into the answer to this question, yes, it is ideal. It is beneficial to run a dethatcher over your lawn or power rake, scarify, whatever word you want to call it. If you run that over the lawn before you put grass seed down, everything is going to come in better. It is better to do that. But should you do it? The answer to that question is a little bit more complex. You don't really need to do it in certain situations. Some situations, it does improve germination of the grass seed, but not by very much. There are some situations where it's almost imperative to run a dethatcher over the lawn before you put grass seed down. And then there are some situations where it's almost pointless. Almost. It's never actually pointless. Some situations, it's almost pointless. So let's start diving briefly into a lot of these different scenarios. So before we really get going here, probably 95% of you or more are going to be running a cold season grass. It's almost, it almost never happens that you're overseeding warm season grass into a lawn. Obviously you could, but it's not very common. So for the sake of this video, we're going to be talking about cold season grasses. So your fescues, your Kentucky bluegrasses, your ryegrasses, and perhaps some fine fescue. So let's say, for instance, we're talking about springtime, the very end of winter. If you've got a lawn that's fairly thick, like you see back here, it actually behooves you to run a scarifier, a power rake over the lawn, dethatch that area because you want to expose as much of the dirt as possible. So if you've got a lot of grass there, whether it is dormant or green, a lot of the soil is going to be covered up by, let's call it dead grass debris. So it could be like dead grass. It could be dormant grass. It could be thatch that has accumulated over the years. When you put grass seed down on something that is thick where you don't really see the bare dirt, then it becomes extremely important to run that dethatcher over it and create as much bare dirt or expose as much bare dirt as possible. We want grass seed to actually be sitting on the dirt. So if it's not sitting on the dirt and it's sitting on dead grass material, then yeah, it will still germinate. But the problem is a lot of that root system is in loose material. It's not in the soil. So it's not well rooted. And if it's not well rooted, then by the time summer rolls around, it's going to be weak. It will be much more susceptible to die off due to heat and drought, summer conditions. Now, conversely, in the springtime, at the very end of winter, March and April, if you see a ton of bare dirt on the ground and you want to put grass seed down, it's actually way less important to run the dethatcher over the ground. The reason for that is because it's all bare already. You've already got soil exposed. So putting the grass seed on the bare soil without the dethatcher is going to be perfectly fine. The important thing to remember, however, is in that scenario, the most important thing is not the dethatcher. It's actually covering the grass seed up with some sort of cover, like straw, like a straw mat or peat moss or coconut coir. To get that grass seed to germinate, it needs to be sitting on the soil, which is easy in a bare soil scenario, but it has to be covered so that the seed stays moist during the long days of spring. Certainly, if you do run a dethatcher over it, you're going to be scoring grooves into the ground, and that will make it easier for the grass seed to settle into those grooves and root down deeply. But it's nowhere near as necessary. Now, during the late parts of summer, as we're going into fall, the same kinds of scenarios exist, except for I would argue that dethatching at the end of summer is actually more important than it is in the beginning parts of spring. And again, the reason for that is because your ground is quite dry. It's very easy. I don't want to say your ground is dry. It is more likely that your ground is very dry. So adding those score lines into the lawn and removing surface debris, all of the grass and weeds that you've been mowing for probably 4 or 5 months straight, all of that debris has settled. You want to scrape all that stuff off, open up score lines into the soil for the grass seed to settle into. Of course, you're still going to cover it up with, say, peat moss, but by having those dredged lines, it's almost like gardening. It'll end up being much easier to get more of the seed to germinate quickly in harsh late summer conditions. Now, Once it germinates, by the time it germinates and starts growing, fall is right around the corner. So heat and drought start waning, and those baby grass plants really can root down very well in the fall. During the germination period, where you have to keep it moist, keep it wet, keep it damp, those score lines from the dethatcher help enormously. Yet again, however, if you have a ton of bare dirt showing, you don't have surface debris sitting on the ground, then the dethatcher is not nearly as big of a deal. During the end of winter, let's get back to the end of winter. At the end of winter, if you've got a thoroughly dormant lawn, running the dethatcher deeply can uproot a lot of good grass that isn't actively growing yet. So the earlier in the season or the late parts of winter before your grass is growing, it's even less important to run that dethatcher on a low setting. If you are going to run it to remove surface debris, put it on a higher setting above grade so that you're not damaging as much of the good grass that you still have. One alternative to dethatching, which will also help with germination, is to use a core aerator. So if you run a core aerator over your lawn, that is something that I recommend every lawn owner do, if possible, at the very early part of spring, at the very end of winter. If you can pull cores out of that lawn and then spread grass seed, some of that seed will go into the holes in the ground, and they will be very, very easy to germinate, but only in the holes. Regardless, any assistance in getting better germination rates is always, that's a good thing in pretty much any book that you write. So with that said, it should be noted that fall is the best time to overseed a lawn or to seed a new lawn. Most people are interested in doing this during the springtime. So if you do want to, I've got a video up here called the 10-Day Lawn. Watch that. That's a project that I did a couple years ago where I planted a new lawn from seed in the early part of spring. 10 days is all it took for the lawn to be completely ready for the rest of the year. Even though spring is not the ideal time to plant grass seed, you certainly can get the job done.